right now. Hello, and welcome to our first Think ND Presents series, Communicating Across Cultures. I'm Dolly Duffy, the Executive Director of your Notre Dame Alumni Association, a job that I think might be the best job in the world because I get to serve all of you. I'm thrilled to be joined today by two of my colleagues from the Mendoza College of Business and one of our many accomplished alumni joining us for today's discussion about the importance of communication. For many of us, our workplaces and our communities have never been more interconnected. Even before the complications of working remotely due to a global pandemic are included. The ability to communicate clearly and effectively, both within and across cultures, is so crucial. And with more than 500 participants who signed up for the series, I'm thinking that many of you agree. I hope that throughout these talks, we're able to build a virtual community, that we're able to learn from each other, our faculty, and our guests, and take these lessons to our offices and our neighborhoods, and I dare say, even our families. So before we get started, I want to take this opportunity to thank our co-sponsors, the Fanning Center for Business Communication, the Mendoza College of Business, and Notre Dame International. These partners have worked with us at the Alumni Association to bring this program from idea to reality, and we are so proud to work with them. Now, I'll welcome in our two facilitators for today's conversation. Director of the Fanning Institute for Business Communication and Associate Professor of Management, Amanda McKendree, and Teaching Professor from the Mendoza College of Business and Hesburgh Lecturer, Jim O'Rourke. Welcome.
Thanks, Dolly. I'm delighted to be here with you all today and to partner with you on this important series. This series provides an opportunity to examine the communication skills critical to enhancing cultural awareness, our own knowledge, and our own skill sets in an increasingly diverse workplace. Today's discussion is informed by a few pre-recorded videos that are posted on ThinkND, where you'll find Jim discussing a few critical concepts on intercultural communication. If you haven't had a chance to check out those videos, you can do so after today's session. Some of you may have registered for today's session to seek clarity around a problem or challenge that you've identified in your workplace or your community. Perhaps others were inspired to attend by the many opportunities that might emerge from a deeper understanding of communication and culture. The current historical moment demands that we all get a little better at this. To discuss these concepts, I'd like to welcome my colleague, Professor Jim O'Rourke, Notre Dame class of 1968, and Chris Murphy, VP of Corporate Communications at AT&T, who is also a Notre Dame alum from the class of 1989. Welcome, Jim and Chris. Chris is with us today representing a company that has existed since 1885. As we explore this company's rich history, we'll highlight significant changes over the years, as well as its organizational culture and future directions. For today's program, you can expect to hear a brief overview of AT&T, as well as what Chris is most proud of at AT&T and how he thinks about diversity and inclusion. We'll then open it up for Q&A. If you have questions for Jim or Chris, please use the Google form that we are sharing with you now. This will allow us to facilitate the questions as effectively as possible. We will try and answer as many questions as possible during our time together today. Now let's turn the program over to my colleague, Jim O'Rourke, a master teacher and expert in corporate reputation.
Thanks, Amanda. Great to be here. I am in my home office in Granger, Indiana, and I I can tell you honestly, I would rather be outside right now. This is one of those days we used to call CAVU in the Air Force, ceiling and visibility unlimited. It's a phenomenal day in South Bend, about 65 or 6 degrees maybe for a high today, and perfect weather. But I'm delighted as well, though, to spend an hour with a friend and colleague, Chris Murphy. The subject is culture and communication. Culture, of course, is as old as humanity itself, but it still deserves our attention. And in recent days, has sort of risen to top of mind among many business leaders, many political leaders, in thinking about how we get on with one another, how we share what we know, and how we feel. So, a couple of thoughts about culture, and then we'll bring Chris in. First of all, my colleague Gary Ferraro at the University of North Carolina once defined culture as everything that people have, think, and do as members of their society. That's a pretty broad definition, but what it means is that it includes material objects, things we own, stuff we have. If you look around your room, it's what you choose to use to decorate your office. It's the car you came to work in. It's the clothing you wear when you interact with your colleagues. And so as part of my culture, I'm wearing a pin given to me by Father Malloy during the sesquicentennial of the university. I don't get a chance to wear it all that often, but I thought this might be a good occasion. Culture is also about ideas, values, and attitude. It's your way of seeing the world and interacting with others. And of course, it's also about expected patterns of behavior. And this includes regional cultures, national cultures, it includes subcultures. But importantly for us in the business school, it includes organizational culture. And in part, that's what we're going to talk about today. Chris, welcome. How are things in Dallas?
Jim, thanks a lot for having me, and thanks for allowing me to represent AT&T. Things are great in Dallas. I'm fortunate to be back in the office, and having gone through the COVID experience at home, working from home in the second half of March, April, and May with twin 8-year-olds who were sent home and mom having to do the really hard work while I was doing the office work. There was some benefit to returning to the office, I would say. And one of the benefits was just to let my kids know that we have a little bit of normalcy. So things are great. It's about 80 degrees, which is 20 degrees cooler than typically it is this time of year. Our summers go to mid-October, and it feels like a really nice South Bend summer day here today. So it's sort of appropriate.
Good. Well, welcome to ThinkND. Thanks for agreeing to share an hour of your time and in particular your expertise with us. So as we begin, I'm wondering if you might be willing to help me and our viewers online with a brief description of AT&T, both as an enterprise and as a place to work. So how do you make money, and what kind of an organization is it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Hopefully you've all heard of the brand AT&T, but there have been a lot of jokes over the years in terms of who is AT&T, because we're such a company that is focused on mergers and acquisitions over the years that a lot of people don't fully understand the brands that are associated with the parent company of AT&T. And then we've had spinoffs too. So the current AT&T is really made up of what used to be known as the phone company. And that's the legacy back to 1885 that you had talked about. And that division, AT&T Communications, is 3/4 of our annual revenue base. And the annual revenue base is about $180 billion a year. So that makes us a Fortune 9 company. And the AT&T Communications, I would say, suggest that we're key in 4 areas. the mobility space. So hopefully, I joked with Jim earlier that this is one of those Zoom calls that if I hear a phone go off while we're speaking, that's quite okay. We know you need to take care of your personal business. So the mobility business, which is about half our annual revenue stream. Then you've got the broadband business, which is our home internet business, and that's a regional business in 20 states. You've got our TV business, which hopefully some of you know that through our two primary brands, which is DirecTV, a company that we purchased in 2015, and then our Uverse product, which is both a TV product and a broadband product. And again, that Uverse name, that Uverse brand is a regional play in 20 states. And then beyond that, our fourth area of business is more of our enterprise business, which is B2B, serving enterprises like the University of Notre Dame for their telecommunications services. When we break out that revenue, I said mobility is about half of our business. You can think of our recent acquisition of Warner Media, which are brands like HBO, Turner, the parent company of CNN, and Warner Brothers, the storied movie-making studio in Los Angeles. That's about 20% of the revenue base. So we're fairly well diversified across what our new CEO calls our three market focus areas. And those market focus areas are, first, broadband connectivity, which is 5G mobility, the Gs that some of you have heard about, the speed on the mobile phones, and our fiber products, which connect you to the internet primarily at home. The second market focus area is what we call software-based entertainment, and that's the delivery of entertainment to homes through DirecTV as an example, but the new example that we have, we're really moving to this internet-based, software-based delivery of entertainment. So AT&T TV is a new product that we debuted this year. It's basically a set-top box that we deliver to you, allows you to plug into any internet connection and deliver you entertainment. And then beyond that, a new product that our Warner Media Group launched this year with some fanfare, which is a product called HBO Max. And that's a software-based product that goes at the heart of trying to disrupt the disruptors in our space, led by a Netflix as an example. Let me switch over to the second part of your question, which is, how is this as a place to work? It's an interesting question, and I go in a lot of directions, and I could probably take the next 45 minutes just talking about how it is as a place to work. Because I first worked for AT&T as a consultant on the public relations side with a company that I worked for based in St. Louis, but I was working out of Dallas, called Fleishman Hillard, which is a public relations firm. And Jim, I would add at the conference that you host every year, it was great to catch up with a lot of those alums who have found their way all over the world into public relations agencies and or corporations.
Well, I even have a connection with Fleishman Hillard. John Graham is a good friend of mine for many, many years, and he would hire me periodically to fly into one of the Fleishman offices and have a look at things. He wanted a kind of independent view, and I thought it was fascinating. I ate and slept well, the Jonathan Club in Los Angeles, and I saw some remarkable talent in that agency. So when I catch up with them at various client operations around the world, it's good to see those folks. Fleishman has had an ability, I think, to identify talent for many years.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, John was instrumental in placing me inside of AT&T more than a decade ago, and he's one of the smartest PR people who I've ever seen, but he's also a guy who forms an instant chemistry with people, much like our Fleishman's current CEO, John Saunders, does. So two individuals that were really instrumental to a lot of the people that were at your conference last year. And it was great to catch up with those folks. In terms of AT&T and what kind of place it is to work, first of all, let me start and acknowledge the obvious, is that we're a huge company, right? We're 225,000 plus employees now. From a corporate communications perspective, we've got 150 plus employees fully dedicated just in the Comsco company to public relations. That doesn't even touch on the corporate communications people on our Warner Media side of the house. So you're talking about, you know, hundreds, if not 1,000 or more people on a daily basis whose job scope is focused on the art and science of corporate communications. In terms of how it is to work, I think if you ask 10 different AT&T employees how it is where you work, what the culture's like, you might get a fair differentiation in the answer that you get. I'm fortunate working at the corporate entity that we move pretty fast. I think we move faster than our competition. And it's a place that rewards great work, and there's tightness and there's chemistry among the ranks that makes me feel like the way that I felt working for John Graham and John Saunders' agency. It made me feel the way that I was able to create connections at the University of Notre Dame with friends and faculty members. I would suggest that that may not be the case in all places and all quarters of our company. Because we are so expansive, we have communicators who work from their homes in Pennsylvania, in Oregon, in Idaho. And so, you know, one of the challenges that we can talk about in the next 45 minutes is, you know, how do you bring the same culture, the same level of what you feel here in corporate headquarters to those different places? That's one of the challenges that we face on a daily basis. I would tell you that I'm very proud of the leadership of this company. The individuals who I happen to support, write for, help communicate their views, without question and without exception, these are exceptional individuals from a business point of view, but they are excellent people as well. And that was, you know, not to go too far off the question, but when I made a career switch a decade ago, leaving Fleshman Hillard, where I had very tight connections with people who were very good to me, I felt like I needed to make sure that I was working for the same type of people when I went to this bigger company. And not only did I feel the assurance of that over the course of the 3 or 4 years that I spent inside this building as a Fleshman Hillard employee, but that was validated very early in my career here with some just experiences that I had with these individuals, supporting them as I moved around the country. My struggles personally with having a young family at home, you know, later in life, my wife and I had twin boys. We were blessed with that experience, and finding work-life balance is part of the culture within AT&T. And the fact that this was a place where I worked where we would get the last flight out to get home to our families if need be. And that concept was really appealing to me, that's the way that the executives felt here. They were only going to travel when business dictated it. And as soon as you could get back home to your family, that was something that was important to them. And I saw that and immediately gravitated to it and said, these are the kind of people I want to be around. Because, and again, this could be a all-day discussion, is work-life balance is a critical part of any corporate culture.
Well, it's interesting. I tell my students that organizations have values. Some of them will actually print them on cards and posters and put them up on the boardroom wall. They don't get a lot of reads, but I would tell you, that my students hear me say again and again, you've got to figure out what life is like inside there while you're still outside. They're not going to change their values to suit you. And you changing your values to suit them is going to be painful. So you got to get on the right horse to begin with. 1885 strikes me as a long time ago for a business enterprise, because as you look at the Fortune 10, most of them were founded in the 1990s.
Yeah.
My grandfather was born on the high plains of Montana in 86, great friend of mine. I asked him once, this is a short story, we were out riding, and he said, I asked him if I could ask him a few questions about change. And he said, what's this about? And I said, well, the nuns at school asked me to interview an old person. And he said, you think I qualify? I said, yes, sir. So I said, what's the most remarkable development you've ever seen in your life? Is it rockets to the moon, or is it radio, television? What do you think? He looked at me, he said, I'm not getting on a rocket to the moon. There isn't anything on TV I want to watch. He said, put me down for indoor plumbing. He said, I know I'll be in there 2 or 3 times a day. So I think about the change he would have seen over that lifetime. Is there anything at AT&T that Thomas Edison would recognize, or is it all different now?
It's a great question. I think there is something that would be recognized, and it's this concept of connection. Whether it's 2 cans in a string, or whether it's the internet in your pocket or your purse, through the mobile phone. Our new CEO, who took the reins back on July 1, has really emphasized our company's purpose is creating connection. And so that connection is the phone call that you make to a loved one. It's the text that you let somebody know you're going to be 5 minutes late for the meeting. It is the FaceTime call that, we in part enable during this COVID environment to have children see their grandparents when they can't see them in person. It's also the connection of entertainment. And that's really the connection with the Warner Media side of the house, with the deal that that's our most recent M&A play of a couple of years ago with the HBO brands, the emotional attachments that people have to certain series or certain movies. And so the thread through all of this is the concept of connection. It's the concept of the emotional attachments that we make. Of course, we need to make money on those emotional attachments. And as the world becomes more digital, you've seen the FANG companies, the Facebooks, the Amazons really capitalize this, disrupt our space. And what we're trying to do is establish a new space with both the content that we create and the ability to distribute that content. We know the end users. We've got hundreds of millions of customers across our platforms. And so hopefully we'll be able to make those sticky attachments, those emotional attachments that then allow us, the new push might be the advertising plays. Advertising is being disrupted in this environment as well, as people move from, print newspaper and TV type of advertising to the more digital formats where the FANG companies had a great first mover advantage in that space. Now, how do we, again, kind of punch back a little bit and see what our opportunities are? So I would suggest that that the people in 1885, if they were around today, it's a different version of the same strategy, and that creating connection really should, it allows us as a company to get behind a very simple purpose, and then that is wrapped in the company values that we uphold, and we have 6 to 8 company values across the companies that we've acquired. And I say 6 to 8 because we've tried to keep the values that a Warner Media might have or a DirecTV might have, but find some common ground across the companies so that we look and act and behave in a common way. And that's a real, it's a stake in the ground that you have to establish when you've got a couple 100,000 people diversified around the globe.
Yeah, with a very large workforce, it's really difficult. I've seen other CEOs in large enterprises struggle with that and conclude that change was difficult. So let me just ask you a kind of two-sided question. You've talked about what you're most proud of at AT&T. Is there any consensus on something that has to change?
Yeah, there is. I mean, the speed at which we work, we have to get faster. Very simply, the companies that have started up, and I've referenced these FANG companies several times already, so you can tell what keeps me up at night, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Googles, the Netflixes. Those companies have a moving advantage in their business model because they've started small with a disruptive strategy, and they've been able to just land their culture and add to it organically and grow their companies. We're coming at it from almost the inverse perspective in terms of we're a very big company that has focused in areas of connection for 140 plus years. And we typically have, people coming in and out of the company. We have businesses that we've gotten in and out of over the course of time. We have our core businesses, and then we'll have peripheral businesses. And so maintaining focus is always a challenge for us. What's our core business? What are we really going to put the wood behind the arrow with? And I would suggest that maintaining that singular focus has been a real challenge for this company, and it's something that our new CEO is going to get back to, is let's simplify the portfolio, let's prune a little bit on some of the businesses that are not core to our purposes, or core to our purpose, and then let's march forward in a smarter, different way with those core businesses, because the attraction that we've had over the course, the AT&T brand and that attraction to people of my age is not the same attraction that, next year's graduate of Notre Dame is going to be looking for and at. The difference is that a lot of the younger folks who are entering the workforce, entering the sales funnel in their 20s, are getting used to free things. They think that, Google offers free services, whereas, in AT&T, why would I pay $125 a month for a TV, or why would I want to do this? I'm on my parents' plan. And so today's customer entering the sales funnel looks very different than the customers in prior decades. I would suggest, back to the earlier question, that Bell might recognize the company. He may not recognize the customer, and the customer has changed. So how can AT&T quickly adapt to that and adapt to this changing environment where people are more willing to spend $10, $15, $20 a month or less on a product, and far less willing to drop $125 on a TV product that has 700 or 800 different channels, and they're only watching 8 channels a month?
Yeah. So appropriate credit to Bell for the phone and Edison for the light bulb. Two questions I want to delve into. One would deal with people, but first, staying on the organizational side of things here, would you characterize AT&T as highly centralized, much like Ford or General Motors, or is this a company that's decentralized with each of the business units responsible for managing their own growth and their own operations?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think over time we've been both. I think the new push is to be highly centralized again. And the main thing is if we're looking at being more customer centric, a highly centralized approach is going to enable that. For instance, in our fiber business, which is our internet business, we'll have fiber builds. We make investments, and we say in our capital allocation program, we're going to take, X million dollars in a given 5-year period and build out that fiber. If we have a highly decentralized operation, then not all the business units that can take advantage of bringing that fiber investment to customers, we're not going to fully maximize that capability. Our enterprise people need to be talking to our consumer broadband people, and the best way for us to do that is in a highly centralized environment. So we're making progress toward that. I would suggest for this audience as well, from a communications standpoint, I've always found it to be more productive, more efficient, more valuable in that highly centralized feel, because in that cascade of influence, it's a lot easier to start from a common point and then push your way down.
That's hard if you buy other companies because they bring in their own values and their own culture. And we talked with Denise Karkos about SiriusXM buying Pandora. Those are really very different business models. So let me ask about people. The whole notion of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has really come top of mind in what may come to be known as a George Floyd era. And part of his legacy is giving us permission to talk about this, for which I'm very grateful. And by the way, I had a similar discussion with my undergraduates yesterday morning in 121 Mendoza. They're all 20-year-old juniors. And they said out loud, we're deeply grateful that we have permission to use new vocabulary around this. You used to have to kind of circumvent part of this and talk in metaphors. So let me just ask, is AT&T a place where Blacks, Hispanics, ethnic minorities, and women are celebrated, encouraged, provided with additional career advice? I talk to folks in other organizations who say, we treat everyone exactly the same. And that certainly has its advantages. There's equity there. But what about treating people different if their needs are different?
It's a great question. It's very timely. I want to start by saying that when I was on the campus last year, I got by LaFortune Student Center and got into the huddle area. And one of the proudest things that I think about when I think about Notre Dame is the picture of Ted Hesburgh with Martin Luther King. And that image has popped up in my head several times over the last 6 months or so. So I want to start with that. But in terms of AT&T, we are very proud of our track record with diversity and inclusion. A lot of third parties rate us in the top 5, top 10 in terms of what we do, how we employ. We have 87,000 people of color in this company. We have 34,000 Black Americans working for us. And I think, our CEO and our leadership has long thought that it's a moral imperative and it's a business imperative. And the two, it's hard to separate either of the two. When I learned about this, it was the moral imperative. But from a business, from a corporate America perspective, it's a business imperative as well, is we serve those customers. And for us to serve those customers, for us to understand who they are, how we can meet their needs, we need that diverse workforce. And what I've experienced in this building, unlike any, I've been working for AT&T now for, I think I've been in the building for 11 years in a 30-year career. That last third of my career is when you see diversity among leadership and you see it in action, creative ideas get better, and how we can connect with our audiences in new and different ways. That diversity of thought comes from diversity of backgrounds. And it really makes me proud. I mean, we talked earlier in the conversation about pride points with AT&T. Diversity and inclusion is really among the top of those pride points. It battles for me in the work that we talk about. It battles for me the frontline people who are out there removing trees after tornadoes and hurricanes to restore cell phone service. Those two elements, I never want to forget on a daily basis who I'm writing for and who I'm serving in our storytelling, because, pardon me, that's some of the best of what AT&T has to offer. And from a national consciousness perspective, this has been a really tough year. But I think this is a pride point for our company, and it's a competitive advantage in the market that we have a really good position here, but our CEO has been clear that there's more work for us to do in this area. It's not just hiring, it's about making sure that these people have pathways to the top executive floors in this company, and that's where there's more work to be done.
Well, that's really an interesting point, because, and my students tell me, I know all about entry-level positions, and I know all about, benefits and whatever else they're using to lure me in. But what's a little cloudier is the path forward. How do I move up or move on? So when you seek to hire or promote people, I mean, it's one thing to get them in the door, but what qualities or characteristics or behaviors do you look for in order to make sure they're given a fair opportunity at promotion or even lateral movements to try new things?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's something that we spend a fair amount of time. I don't know that there's a precise right answer to your question. It's a little bit of experimentation. But, our organization of corporate communicators, I had mentioned earlier, we've got 150 or so people. We know what we're looking for when we hire. I mean, it's typically, let's take a look at the resume, let's take a look at the experience. Was there good chemistry in the interview? When we bring those people in, I think one of the advantages of working for AT&T is once you get inside the company, if you're using your job as a intellectual challenge, and I'll be honest, I struggle with that sometimes. It's the stress versus the intellectual challenge. We like our people to be in intellectual challenging positions and then rotate them out every 2 to 3 years. So the benefit of coming into a company like AT&T of our size is the fact that you can wear one hat for 2 or 3 years, go change your hat, feel like you have a new job, serving new clients, working in new parts of the business, but your paycheck still comes every 2 weeks from AT&T. And that's a real benefit to the size of the company. We talked a little bit earlier about some of the challenges with the size of this company, but that's a real benefit. And I think what we've tried to do, and I'll say that we took a little bit of this thinking from our friends at Fleishman Hillard, who serves us as one of our primary agencies, is we try to level the playing field for the various levels of positions that we have in our corporate communications entity. So quickly, I'll say, there are 5 or 6 different levels of jobs. Typically, as you rise in your level, you have a broader team, and you know it's moving along a lattice. Is every couple of years you're going to get a new opportunity. You prove your opportunity laterally. You prove yourself to the 4 vice presidents that serve our SVP of corporate communications, and you move up that way. One thing that I would close with is chemistry matters. I mean, business is a people business. And so, you know, I've been fortunate in my career path that there have been a few individuals who I've connected with, and I've been able to stay in touch with those people over time. And in a 31-year career, I could name on or list on one hand the key individuals who have really, you know, helped along the career path. And I try to mentor people here in that same way. Is you may work for 10 or 12 bosses over a 30-year career here, but there's probably just going to be a couple of those who you develop deep connections with. And those are the people who you need to stay in touch with over time. And one of our leaders in the business often talks about in trying to mentor kids in their 20s that that's not a LinkedIn connection. Yeah. You know, that's not just an email every now and then. That's a sit down and eye to eye, you know, in the non-COVID environment, to have a coffee and a meaningful conversation with those people that spans beyond just the day in, day out work grind.
Well, I tell my students, you got to make those friends. You have to have a friend in your reporting chain at your level whom you can help and who will help you. She'll drop whatever she's doing and come to your aid. But I say kind of 2 columns over in the reporting chains, not at all in the same silo. You need to find somebody 3 or 4 levels up who will hold a confidence, who will tell you you're about to cross a line you shouldn't, and it never gets back to you. You need those kinds of friends. And I tell them as well, you need to become that friend at a certain point for new employees. And that's going to happen faster than you think. If you're in the business 5 years, you're already in a position to help others. So,
Jim, I just want to add, it's one of the most rewarding aspects of a career is the ability to give back a little bit and mentor those individuals. And I always use this line with our younger folks is, do not be concerned that you're stepping out of line by asking for mentorship. There's never that long of a line at any individual's door from people who are bold enough to say, hey, would you mind giving me some thinking? It's very rewarding on the other side. And frankly, it's a nice break sometimes from the daily grind to say, spend some time on the human side of the business.
Yeah, good. Chris, let's go to the audience, those folks online who may have questions. So Amanda McKendree, has anybody sent a question in yet?
Yes, we've got several great questions here. It seemed like the idea of chemistry and looking for chemistry in an interview resonated with several of our participants today. And one question asks about, when dealing with diverse cultures, how do you avoid communicating to people that they need to become like you in order to fit in?
That's a great question. I mean, some of you probably have better answers than I would. I just think you stick to your principles in terms of diversity of thought. I don't know that it's hard to move off of where we've arrived at a particular point in time, right? You've gone through a life path and a career path that gets you to a certain state of mind. At AT&T, we don't ask those people to change. In fact, we promote something that we call employee groups. We have more than 40 employee groups who allow individuals of diverse backgrounds to connect with their same individuals within the company and talk through issues of the day. We celebrate that with an annual conference called our Employee Group Conference every October. And our executives, some who are diverse, some who aren't, bring in, and we develop interest talks for those people so that they can look at their careers as an AT&T employee, but also as an AT&T female and mother of 3 kids at home, or a Black employee, or an Asian American employee. So I would suggest that we try to celebrate that, and we want those individuals to keep the diversity that they bring to the table. The consciousness of this in corporate America, from my limited perspective, it's never risen to the level that it has in 2020. And the Floyd and Arbery murders are an important part of that. That's their legacy, Jim, I think, as you had said. I think COVID is an important part of this as well. There are multiple layers to this, but I think, this 2020 year, this particular point in time, has the ability to be what the 1960s were when I learned about the 1960s in the late 1980s. This is a flashpoint in time. It's extended, and I think a lot of us are happy to see that this is going to have a real impact in corporate America. There's going to be a COVID Floyd generation of kids that are coming into the workforce that look at things completely different. And if corporate America hasn't woken up to that yet, then there are going to be competitive disadvantages for those companies going forward.
As I write and think about corporate culture, I am occasionally drawn back to the work of Milton Rokeach, who studied dogmatism. And he really wanted to know about people who were narrow-minded, people who were very broad-minded, and what the factors and characteristics were. One of the things he concluded, and eventually one is you can measure it, and if you can do that, you can attempt to manage it. But he found that organizations that hired people who brought in different ideas got the organizational's boundaries to begin moving out. And he said the advantage is, if you're highly dogmatic, you know what the answer is. It's right in here. But that's the only answer you're ever going to get. And if you expand your horizons just a bit, you get new ideas, you get new opportunities, you get new viewpoints. And it turns out that some of his students discovered that these were more successful. They had, in financial terms, they had lower beta levels, less volatility. If they were a bit more diverse, a little bit less dogmatic. So there actually is some research that supports exactly what you're saying. Amanda, other questions?
Yes, we have one more question here that focuses on AT&T's culture. And it's asking, what aspects of culture do you believe are most likely to repel employees who won't be a good fit? And how do you communicate about these parts of your culture, if you do?
That's a really good question as well. I think the hardest part of our culture would be the hardest part of anyone working for a company of a couple 100,000 people, is your ability to feel like you make an impact within the company and within the culture. I saw a movie during the COVID period, Ford versus Ferrari, and very quickly, you may have seen the same kind of concept in other representations, but Ford needed to go out and hire a gentleman named Carroll Shelby, who's a Texan and an innovator in the racing space. And Carroll Shelby went to go visit Henry Ford II in his offices in Detroit. And Henry Ford II asked Carroll, what's wrong with my company? And Shelby pointed out to him that he watched a red folder move through 20 different hands in a particular office until it landed on the desk of Henry Ford II. And I think that's a really good characterization of some of the struggles that we have in this internet-connected world that moves at rapid pace. You know, Jim and I can have 10 conversations in 10 different emails over the course of 7 days, and it's really fast. But then you work for a company where you come in and to move a simple, you know, I'll get tactical here, to move a press release through the chain, how many different people have to touch that? And the creative product, the direction changes from what you create in the beginning and the purpose of that document, the purpose of what you're looking to communicate, how you might lose the purpose over that traversing the 20, 25 different people who touch it, with the lawyers and the business folks and other people who come at it. You know, this is an art form. So the artists of yesteryear would be completely befuddled and angry about having to work in this type of environment. And so finding ways to make your product better through the number of people who have to touch it is one of the true arts in having to work in an environment like this. And I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I recall as an Air Force officer, you know, of course, you're going to move every 36 months. You're going to be somewhere else, a different organization, different part of the world. In a meeting with a commander whom I really, really admired, a young airman put his hand up and said, I'm not sure I really understand this outfit, Colonel. He said, this doesn't really look like the real Air Force to me. And so the colonel said to him, I hear from time to time that people are out searching for the real Air Force. He said, by the way, the answer to that is it's wherever you are, because that's where we serve the mission. That's where we're committed to defend the nation. And he focused on that notion that it's all real right here. And when you move, it's going to be just as real when you get to your new duty station. So, Amanda, anything else left for us? Or?
Yes, we have a great question here that really encourages us to think about the future of AT&T. And as AT&T becomes bigger with all of the mergers and acquisitions, what do you do to maintain the core values, but also be more inclusive with various different priorities and employees with different backgrounds and expertise?
Yeah, it's another great question. I would suggest my headline on that answer is it starts at the top. Leadership has to communicate those values. They have to communicate who we are, what we stand for. And in a company of this size, then it trickles down and cascades down. But if your top people at a company aren't talking the talk and then walking the walk, then I think it has no chance of sticking with, you know, Joe and Jane employee who might be in a field office, you know, thousands of miles from headquarters. And I think that the events of 2020 really prove that out. It starts at the top. Companies are becoming more and more transparent. And I think that's the best way for values to stick, is to prove them. And I'll offer a short story here about the times that we're in. I would suggest that in a world where a cell phone is a microphone and a cell phone is a camera, companies' values today are tested more frequently than ever before. And there are opportunities for companies to prove their values very quickly. And it can be that they have to make difficult decisions in the public realm to back their own values. I would tell you that, again, this is another point of pride in working for AT&T, is if you scan the news over the last couple of years, executive behavior, a lot of this stuff used to be held in the closet. Well, a lot of this stuff, we're living in a more free-range society now with the internet in our pocket. And very quickly, you have to address and deal with those types of issues. And you see companies, I think brand equity is built on the decisions that executives are making. And do those values, are they upholding the values of the company? Are they upholding the values of today's consumers? I think consumers today are more value conscious about the companies that they decide to do business with than ever before. And I think that that's one of the great things of this next generation of buyers that I like, is that because they get so much information, because they have so many options, they don't have the limited options that some of us had 3 decades ago, is values rise on the buying side of this equation, and therefore it forces companies to really take a stand and make stands that buying decisions are going to be based off of.
Really good. Do we have one more, Amanda, or shall we wrap up here? What do you think?
We have one final question, and we can actually open it up to you and to Chris, and it's asking about helpful resources or blogs to help us think more about culture.
Okay, well, I'm just going to get up and pull a book off the shelf here. I would say there are a couple of very interesting books. Let me offer a book written by a colleague of ours named Liddy Tulija, writing about culture in organizations, and it's called Intercultural Communication for Business. There are others out there, but her work is based on the work of a couple of Dutchmen, Gert Hofstede and Fons Trompenaar, and it works around dimensions and values. It's an interesting read, but the thing I suppose I would send students to as they gather information, there are kind of 2 things you can do. Go look at the sorts of things companies do and ask if their actions are matching their words, right? Arthur Page said, tell the truth, prove it with action. The other thing I would say is pick up the phone and meet somebody new. Ask for a conversation, not just a LinkedIn connection, but a conversation with people who work in other kinds of businesses. And I think your best connection, for this group at least, would be through the Notre Dame Alumni Association. I've met a lot of people who have been very helpful in my understanding of other companies. Chris?
I don't have as broad an answer, Jim, as that, but I would say 2 books. Like when you decide to work for a company as large as I have, and again, I started on the smaller side, Jack Welch's book and Ed Whitaker's book are 2 books that I think are must-reads for people, just to get a sense, not necessarily to follow, but to get a sense for the types of issues that are dealt with in these big companies. And it just is something that you can pick up, consider, take what you like, put away what you don't like.
Tell me who Ed Whitaker is.
So Ed Whitaker was the longtime CEO of AT&T. He rose from what was SBC Communications, and he was a legendary figure who ran this company for 20 plus years and retired, I want to say it was 2007, 2008, but really grew this thing from a regional player to the national entity that it is today. And culture and values were really important to Ed. Straight talk was a mantra that he really thought was a competitive advantage for our company, is tell people what you're going to do and then go do it, and over deliver and under promise. And I think some of those basics are something that is critical today in today's culture. That very simple mantra, it's great for internal purposes, but it gets back to buying decisions as well today. The consumer is going to leave you. The consumer is more fleeting than ever before. So delivering on what you say you're going to deliver is a critical part of that culture.
Well, telling the truth and communicating honestly will do two things for you. I tell my students, among your own employees, you want to reduce uncertainty and you want to reduce anxiety. And I got to tell you, there are employees that I talk with day in, day out now whose anxiety needle is off the chart. And it really, really helps to just ask, what's on your mind? Tell me what you'd like to talk about, and to listen, become a better listener.
And with that very helpful sentiment, we probably should close out for this afternoon. Thanks to our discussants today, Chris Murphy and Professor Jim O'Rourke. We will be back with you all in 2 weeks for part 3 of our program. You can visit ThinkND and watch Jim's short explainer videos. You can review those and bring any questions that you have to our session. We will have Linda Rutherford joining us, and she is Senior Vice President and Chief Communications Officer from Southwest Airlines. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.